I need you to understand what just happened in Minneapolis. Because if you only watch mainstream media, you are being fed a carefully constructed lie designed to justify the execution of an American citizen by federal agents. And I have been tracking this story from the moment it broke, talking to sources on the ground, analyzing every frame of footage that has emerged. What I am about to show you will make your blood boil, because this is not just about one man. This is about what this government is willing to do to any one of us when we become inconvenient. This is about the machinery of state violence turning against the very people it claims to protect. Alex Priddy was 37 years old. He was an ICU nurse at the Minneapolis Veterans Affairs Hospital. Every single day, he walked into that hospital and cared for the men and women this country sent to war. The soldiers who came back broken from Iraq and Afghanistan. The veterans dealing with trauma that most of us cannot even imagine. That was Alex Priddy's life. That was his calling. He had been working in the VA system since 2014, first as a clinical research assistant, then becoming a registered nurse in 2021. He was a former Boy Scout. He was a legal gun owner with a Minnesota state permit to carry, because he believed in his Second Amendment rights like millions of other Americans. He had no criminal record except for a few traffic tickets. This was not some dangerous radical. This was the kind of person any community would be proud to call their own. And on January 24th, 2026, federal agents shot him approximately 10 times in the back while he was pinned face down on the ground by 6 officers. His crime? He tried to protect a woman who had just been shoved to the ground by a federal agent. His last act on this earth was an act of compassion, and for that, they killed him. Within hours, the Trump administration's propaganda machine kicked into overdrive. Stephen Miller, the deputy White House chief of staff and the architect of the most brutal immigration policies this country has seen, called Priddy a domestic terrorist. He called him a would-be assassin who came to massacre federal agents. Homeland Security Secretary Noem stood in front of cameras and told reporters that Priddy wanted to inflict maximum damage and kill law enforcement. She called him a domestic terrorist who was brandishing a weapon. Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino claimed Priddy intended to commit mass murder against federal agents. They painted a picture of a dangerous criminal who got what was coming to him. They expected the American public to simply accept their version of events. But here is what they did not count on. We are living in the age of the smartphone. Dozens of people were filming when it happened, and those videos tell a very different story than the one the government wants you to hear. Those videos expose the lies in real time. Those videos are the reason this cover-up is falling apart. To understand how we got here, you need to understand what Operation Metro Surge really is. Because the mainstream media is not going to give you the full picture. They will tell you it is about immigration enforcement. They will not tell you it is about political punishment. In December 2025, the Department of Homeland Security announced this operation, and by January 6, 2026, they had expanded it into what they proudly called the largest immigration enforcement operation ever carried out in American history. They sent more than 3,000 federal agents to the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, 2,000 from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, 1,000 from Customs and Border Protection. Think about what that number means. 3,000 federal agents deployed to a single American metropolitan area. That is not a law enforcement operation. That is a military-style occupation of an American city. And the choice of Minnesota was no accident. This administration does nothing by accident. This is a state governed by Democrat Tim Walz, who was the Democratic vice presidential candidate in 2024. A state with sanctuary laws that this administration despises. A state with a significant Somali American community that Donald Trump has repeatedly and viciously demonized throughout his political career. The state of Minnesota actually sued the federal government, arguing in court that Operation Metro Surge was created specifically to punish the state for its immigration policies. Think about that. An American state had to go to court to argue that the federal government was using immigration enforcement as a weapon of political retaliation. A judge actually ordered the Trump administration to respond to the allegation that the operation was designed to punish Minnesota. This is the reality we are living in. Governor Tim Walz called it a war being waged against Minnesota. He was not exaggerating. When you send 3,000 armed federal agents into a community that did not ask for them, when your own stated goal is to conduct the largest enforcement operation in history, when 2 American citizens end up dead in 3 weeks, that is not law enforcement. That is warfare. and people were already dying before Alex Pretty. On January 7th, just 17 days earlier, ICE agents shot and killed Renee Nicole Macklin Good, another 37-year-old American citizen, on the streets of Minneapolis. The New York Times and ABC News analyzed the video of that shooting too. They found that the ICE agent fired first, shooting into the windshield and then through the driver's side window. That is 2 American citizens killed by federal immigration agents in 3 weeks in one American city. That is the 3rd shooting by federal agents in Minneapolis in that same period. When you see a pattern this clear, you have to ask yourself what is really going on. This is not law enforcement making difficult split-second decisions. This is a pattern of violence. Now let me walk you through exactly what happened on January 24th, because the video evidence is devastating for the government's narrative. And I want you to understand every detail, because the details matter. The details expose the lies. Alex Pretty was on the street that morning doing 2 things. He was filming federal agents with his cell phone, which is his absolute constitutional right. Courts have affirmed repeatedly that citizens have the right to record police activity in public spaces. He was also directing traffic, helping keep people safe during the chaos of the ongoing protests against Operation Metro Surge. When he saw a federal agent shove a woman to the ground, he had a choice to make. He could have looked away. He could have kept filming from a safe distance. Instead, he did what any decent human being with courage would do. He put himself between her and the agents. He put his arm around her to protect her. He raised his hands, and he was pepper sprayed directly in the face for trying to help someone. Multiple videos from multiple angles show what happened next, and this is crucial. You can see Pretty holding a phone in his hand, not a gun, a phone. His other hand is raised above his head in a universal gesture of non-aggression. 6 federal agents tackle him and pin him face down on the ground. A 37-year-old nurse, pepper sprayed, tackled by 6 armed federal agents, pinned to the pavement unable to move. And here's the detail that demolishes everything the government has claimed. One of the videos clearly shows an agent reaching to Pretty's waist area and removing a gun while he is pinned down. They took his gun. They had already disarmed him. He was no longer armed. Whatever theoretical threat they want to claim he posed, it was neutralized the moment that gun left his body. And then, moments later, with Pretty still pinned face down on the ground, surrounded by 6 agents, completely helpless, an agent points his weapon at Pretty's back and fires. Multiple shots. Then another agent fires. Approximately 10 rounds total, pumped into the back of a man who was already subdued, already disarmed, already completely at their mercy, face down on the pavement. CNN analyzed the footage. NPR analyzed the footage. Bellingcat, the internationally respected open-source intelligence organization, analyzed the footage. The New York Times analyzed the footage. They all reached the same conclusion. There is no video from any angle that shows Pretty holding a weapon at any point during the encounter. Not before the tackle. Not during the struggle. He was holding his phone. That is what the evidence shows. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara confirmed that Pretty was a lawful gun owner with a valid permit. And then the chief said something that should have ended every lie the government told. He said he had no evidence that the weapon was ever brandished. The chief of police in the city where this happened said there was no evidence the victim ever brandished his weapon. So when Kristi Noem stood in front of cameras and said Pretty was brandishing a weapon, she was not mistaken. She was not working from incomplete information. She was lying. When Stephen Miller called him a would-be assassin who came to massacre cops, he was lying. When Gregory Bovino said Pretty wanted to inflict maximum damage on law enforcement, he was lying. These are not differences of interpretation. These are not good faith disagreements about what the evidence shows. These are deliberate fabrications designed to justify an execution and destroy the reputation of a dead man who cannot defend himself. And now the lies are falling apart, and the people who told them are turning on each other. This is what happens when the cover-up starts to collapse. Cowards start looking for someone else to blame. According to Axios reporting from January 28th, Stephen Miller was the one who constructed the massacre narrative. A source familiar with the process of drafting the official statement told Axios exactly how it happened. Miller heard the word gun in the initial reports and immediately knew what the narrative would be. Pretty came to massacre cops. That was going to be the story. That was the spin. Miller did not wait for investigation results. He did not wait for video analysis. He did not wait for witness interviews. He heard one word and built an entire lie around it. And he ordered Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to repeat that lie in front of cameras. Within hours of the shooting, before any real investigation could begin, before anyone had reviewed all the footage, Stephen Miller had already decided what the official story would be. The truth was never the point. The narrative was always the point. But here's where it gets even more explosive. Noem is now throwing Miller under the bus to save herself. According to the same Axios report, Noem privately told a source something remarkable. She said that everything she has done at the direction of the president and Stephen. Let me make sure you understand what that means. The Secretary of Homeland Security, the person responsible for ICE and CBP and the entire immigration enforcement apparatus, is now claiming that she only repeated lies about a dead American citizen because she was following orders from Stephen Miller and Donald Trump. She is saying she was just doing what she was told. On January 27th, Trump held a 2-hour meeting at the White House with Noem to discuss the situation. Noem brought Corey Lewandowski, her de facto chief of staff, and who was noticeably absent from that 2-hour meeting? Stephen Miller. The man who constructed the massacre lie, the man who ordered Noem to spread it, the man who called Alex Pretty a would-be assassin. He was not even in the room. When the president meets for 2 hours to discuss a crisis, and specifically excludes the person most responsible for creating that crisis, that tells you everything you need to know about who is being set up to take the fall. And Miller knows it. He is trying to shift blame right back. He now claims that any early comments made were based on information sent to the White House through Customs and Border Protection. He is saying CBP gave him bad information. But here is the problem with that excuse. CBP reports to the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security is run by Noem, so Noem blames Miller for the lies. Miller blames CBP for giving him false information. CBP reports to Noem. It is a circular firing squad of cowards, each one pointing at the other, each one trying to avoid accountability for what they did to Alex Pretty's memory. Senator Tom Tillis, a Republican from North Carolina, had something to say about Stephen Miller's behavior. And remember, Tillis is a Republican. He said Stephen Miller never fails to live up to my expectations of incompetence. He criticized Miller for attacking Pretty, for calling him a terrorist and an assassin, before he had even talked with anybody on the ground, before any investigation, before any evidence review. Miller just started attacking a dead man. When Republican senators are publicly calling the deputy chief of staff of a Republican president incompetent on national television, you know the internal collapse is real. The White House itself is now in full retreat. They are running away from their own officials. When reporters asked Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt if President Trump agreed with Miller and Noem that Pretty was a domestic terrorist, she did not defend them. She said she had not heard the president characterize Mr. Pretty in that way. The White House press secretary stood at the podium and refused to stand behind the claims made by the Deputy Chief of Staff and the Secretary of Homeland Security. They are abandoning Miller and Noem because they know what those videos show. They know they cannot defend the indefensible. They know the lie has collapsed. And the political consequences are mounting by the hour. As of Tuesday night, 162 of the 213 House Democrats have co-sponsored articles of impeachment against Noem. That is more than 3/4 of the entire Democratic caucus. The resolution was originally introduced by Representative Robin Kelly of Illinois back on January 14th, after the killing of Renee Good. The Pretty killing supercharged the effort. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democratic Whip Catherine Clark, and Democratic Caucus Chair Pete Aguilar issued a joint statement that did not mince words. They said the violence unleashed on the American people by the Department of Homeland Security must end forthwith. Noem should be fired immediately, or we will commence impeachment proceedings in the House of Representatives. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. That is Democratic leadership issuing an ultimatum to the President of the United States. The Pretty family released a statement that should haunt everyone involved in this cover-up for the rest of their lives. Michael and Susan Pretty, Alex's parents, called the lies told about their son sickening and reprehensible. They said it was clear from the video that their son was not holding a gun in the moments before the shooting. He had a phone in one hand. His other hand was raised above his head while trying to protect the woman ICE just pushed down, all while being pepper sprayed. And then they said something that captures who their son was. His last thought and act was to protect a woman. That was Alex Pretty, not a terrorist, not an assassin, a man whose final act was trying to protect a stranger. And they asked the public to please get the truth out. That is what I am doing right now. The American Federation of Government Employees, the largest federal employee union in the entire country, has called for Noem's firing. Think about that. Federal employees themselves are calling for the head of a major department to be removed. More than 24 Republican lawmakers are now calling for a thorough investigation into the Pretty shooting. The state of Minnesota continues its lawsuit against the federal government. Protests continue in Minneapolis and are spreading to other cities. The pressure is building from every direction. If you believe in the Second Amendment, consider what happened to Alex Pretty. He was a legal gun owner exercising his constitutional right to carry. He had a permit. He followed the law. He never drew his weapon. Federal agents took it from him while he was pinned down on the ground. And then the government used the fact that he legally owned a gun to justify shooting him 10 times in the back. Every legal gun owner in America should be asking themselves what this means for them. If carrying a legal weapon means that federal agents can kill you and then claim you were a threat, what is the point of the Second Amendment? If you believe in the First Amendment, consider what happened to Alex Pretty. He was filming federal agents in a public space. He was exercising his constitutional right to document the actions of government officials. This is protected activity that courts have affirmed again and again. He was killed doing something that every American has the right to do. Every citizen journalist, every person who has ever recorded police activity on their phone, every live streamer covering protests, should be asking what this means for them. If you believe in due process, consider what happened to Alex Pretty. He was never arrested, never read his rights, never charged with any crime, never stood before a judge, never had his day in court. He was executed on the street and then put on trial in the court of public opinion by government officials who knew they were lying. The presumption of innocence, a foundational principle of American justice, means nothing when federal agents can kill you, and then the government can fabricate whatever story it wants about who you were. They made him into a terrorist after he was dead, because dead men cannot defend themselves. This is what empire looks like when it turns inward. For decades, the United States has used these tactics abroad against people in other countries who had no recourse. Drone strikes that kill civilians, followed immediately by claims that the victims were militants and terrorists. Support for coups against democratically elected governments, justified by fabricated threats that were later proven to be lies. Invasions launched on false pretenses, with anyone who questioned the official narrative labeled as unpatriotic or worse. The same government that lied about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that lied about progress in Afghanistan for 20 years, that has lied about operations in dozens of countries, is now using those same techniques on American soil against American citizens. The rest of the world is watching. Russia is watching how America treats its own people when they become inconvenient. China is watching how the supposed beacon of democracy handles dissent. The global south, the nations of Africa and Asia and Latin America that have been on the receiving end of American intervention for generations, they are watching too. They have seen the United States lecture them about human rights and rule of law and democratic values for decades. And now they see federal agents executing a nurse on camera in broad daylight. They see the government lying about it immediately. They see officials turning on each other to avoid consequences while no one faces accountability. What credibility does America have left to preach to anyone about anything? How can this government lecture any nation on earth about human rights after what it did to Alex Pretty and what it said about him afterward? I want to be very clear about what I believe is happening here because I do not want there to be any confusion. This is not an isolated incident caused by a few bad actors. This is not a matter of some rogue agents who need better training. This is a system revealing its true nature under pressure. When Stephen Miller heard the word gun, he did not wait for facts. He constructed a narrative designed to protect the agents who killed Alex Pretty and to justify the killing to the public. When Kristi Noem repeated that narrative on camera, she was not mistaken. She was not working from incomplete information. She was participating in a deliberate cover-up. When Gregory Bovino claimed Pretty wanted to commit a massacre, he was providing political cover for what the videos clearly show was an execution of a helpless man. And the fact that they are now turning on each other does not make any of them less culpable. It does not mean the system is working. It does not mean accountability is coming. It just shows that there is no honor among those who serve this system. When the heat gets too intense, they will sacrifice each other in a heartbeat without hesitation. Noem will blame Miller. Miller will blame CBP. Trump will distance himself from both of them while offering vague statements about reviewing everything. And when the news cycle moves on, Alex Pretty will still be dead. His family will still be grieving. The agents who killed him will still be free. And nothing will have fundamentally changed. But pressure is not accountability. Investigations that drag on for months and lead nowhere are not justice. Personnel changes and demotions are not consequences. Unless the people who lied face real repercussions for lying, unless the agents who killed Alex Pretty are held accountable in a court of law, this will happen again. It will happen to someone else's son or daughter in another American city. And the government will tell another set of lies and expect us to believe them because we believed them before. What can you do? I am not going to pretend this is simple. The forces arrayed against truth and accountability are immense. But there are things that matter. First, do not let this story disappear. Share it with everyone you know. Talk about it. Post about it. Make sure the people in your life understand exactly what happened in Minneapolis and what the government tried to hide. The administration is counting on the news cycle to move on. Do not let it. Second, support independent media. The mainstream outlets are covering this story now because they have to, because the evidence is too overwhelming to ignore. But it was independent journalists and citizen footage that exposed the lies in the first place. Third, demand accountability from your elected representatives. Whether you are a Democrat or Republican or independent, call your senators and call your representatives. Tell them that lying about a dead citizen to cover up a killing is unacceptable in America. Tell them you are watching. Tell them you will remember. Fourth, remember Alex Pretty. Remember who he actually was, not the terrorist they tried to turn him into. Remember that he was a nurse who spent his days caring for veterans. Remember that his last act on earth was trying to protect a woman he did not even know. Remember that he deserved to come home to his family that night. His name was Alex Pretty. The empire is not going to stop on its own. Stephen Miller is not going to have an attack of conscience. Kristi Noem is not going to suddenly start telling the truth. The apparatus that killed Alex Pretty and then lied about him to justify the killing will continue operating until it is dismantled or until it is forced to change by overwhelming public pressure that cannot be ignored. But the truth is out now. It is documented in dozens of videos from dozens of angles. It is confirmed by independent analysis from multiple news organizations across the political spectrum. It is acknowledged even by officials within this administration who are desperately trying to blame each other. The Pretty family asked us to get the truth out. That is exactly what I am doing with this video. And that is exactly what I am asking you to do when you finish watching. Because if Alex Pretty's death means nothing, if the lies told about him face no consequences, if the people who defamed him while his body was still warm never answer for what they did, then none of us are truly safe. Not our rights, not our reputations, not our lives. The videos showed us the truth. Now it is up to us, every single one of us, to make sure that truth matters.